What I'm going to do is talk about the food chain as well as about robots and finish actually on skills. Because to me, the really critical issue is whether we have the skills to go through this change process or not. So I'm involved in a whole raft of things, both within the UK, right across the EU. I also link into China, South America, and places of that nature. And what I'm seeing across the world is the speed of change is just accelerating. And I don't think actually that we're keeping up. So my key point, I'll come back to at the end, is if we want to be part of this agenda, we've actually got to do more and we've got to do it faster. This was something that I saw in Stansted last year. Anybody spot anything that's a bit odd about the statement that Starbucks put up there? It says local food at the top. Processed in Amsterdam, local to Stansted. I think what that shows us is that consumers and consumer needs are changing, and they're changing incredibly quickly. The network that I'm involved in right across the EU is focused on short food chains. Now, some people think that short food chains is just about distance. It's the food mile agenda. Actually, that's not where I am. It's not where the network that I'm involved in is. It's about the number of steps in that chain. And can we actually get that traceability, that provenance, the blockchain type of issue that Simon just referred to? And can we get more of the value in the chain back to farmers and to the food producer? Because over time, what we've seen is the amount going back to farm has got smaller and smaller. I think that some of this agenda will allow us to actually shorten those food chains, take steps out of the chain. It will completely change the way that the supply chain works, and potentially there's a real gain in that. Horticulture is actually better than most of the rest of the food sector. But even in horticulture, I think that there are gains to come from this. The context from a tech point of view, I quite like this quote. Stuck with technology, but what we actually want is stuff that really works. And I think that's Simon's point. Actually, there's a lot of new tech coming. From a business point of view, the critical thing is what can we use and use now? What actually works for us, produces the commercial return, allows us to make that change. I think that what we need to be thinking through is not only where do we want to be in 5 years' time, but what can we do now? We've got a real challenge in the next 3, 4, 5 years. Through Brexit and all of those types of changes, we actually need to adopt some of these new ideas now, as well as investing in the things we want to do in 5 and 10 years' time. If you look at the broader agenda, what the manufacturing sector says is most of that sector says that this is going to impact on them by 2025. But only 11% thought that they were ready. So there's a big gap between what even the manufacturing sector thinks is coming and whether they believe that we've done enough yet to respond to this. The trade unions have just launched a review to look at what the future workforce and skills will be about. What I think is quite striking about this, the first, when they went out and asked lots of people across a whole range of sectors, are you ready for this? Can you adapt to that change? Actually, most of the people thought that they could adapt to that change. Some of them were concerned about losing their jobs, but not all. Many of them thought that they could actually respond to that challenge and that change. However, when they then said, is government helping? The figure goes down to 9%. Was the union helping? And this was a survey that went out to union members. Only 16% thought that their union was helping, and only 27% thought that their business was helping to prepare for that change process. So there's an enormous gap between what people believe they can do for themselves and what they believe others are doing for them. And I think we need to try and close that gap. So how will it affect the supply chain that we're all concerned with? The reality is nobody knows. Anybody who stands here and tells you they know where this sector is going to be in 5 years' time, I'm afraid, I think is lying, or they're purely guessing. The reality is the speed of change means there's going to be so much change, we don't actually know yet what it's going to look like. What we do know is that we're going to have all sorts of changes. Changes in the way the supply chain works, changes in the way that we do jobs, changes in the way that we track and trace things along that supply chain. Actually, we're going to see lots of job changes. Old roles will go, new roles will arrive, they will require new skills, which is why I'm so focused now on the skills agenda. Can we actually equip the workforce with the skills to drive that change? And can we do it as fast as the rest of the world? Simon's point. So is there an opportunity? Absolutely there is. The UK food chain is the biggest sector that we have. It's growing at 2 to 3% a year. But actually, when we look at the global food chain, it's growing at 6% a year. It's 5 times the size of the car sector. It's truly massive. What that means is lots of new tech is coming in because venture capital is flooding into this sector. However, most of that venture capital is going in other parts of the world. So again, the challenge for the UK is, can we be at the front of that agenda? Can we drive that change? Can we embrace it before other places do? And I'll come back to that. If you look broadly at the food chain at the moment, and I would say that pot plants and cut flowers are all part of this, we have a structure where most of what we produce on farm actually goes through the processors, the wholesale, the food retail types of route. The normal types of supply chain that we all know, love or hate, depending on your view within that chain. My view is that what we're going to see is that the digital change, the digital world will disrupt much of that chain. It will allow us to actually run that chain in different ways, potentially take steps out of it. And when you consider that retail at the moment is about 27% of all the value in that chain, the place I would not want to be at the moment is a bricks and mortar retailer. Actually, they are at real risk of not being able to respond fast enough to the types of changes that we're seeing within the marketplace. So what do I expect to see? I'm going to pick out each of these points in a bit more detail with an example that I've seen. I think we'll see a focus on online purchase and delivery. We will see vending. We will see food on the go. And food retail that remains will have to be very, very different. It will have to be food, what I call food theatre. It cannot just be somewhere that you go and buy things. It's actually got to be more than that, because if you just want to buy something, you'll do it online. So what are some of the ideas around this? Out in Belgium this year, large agri-food business had grouped together 14 businesses to do online and then to deliver. So absolutely on the money, the right sort of agenda. My only question is, can they win the race against Amazon? Actually, I'm not really concerned about them. What I'm concerned about is the Chinese. The Chinese online market, in terms of the number of online consumers, is bigger than the rest of the world put together. So actually, it's the online Chinese businesses that I think will take much of this market. If we're going to respond, we have to respond to the likes of Alibaba. It is those businesses that have got the money, the pockets, the investment, and the ideas that will drive change. Collection and vending. I saw this in Austria, and I was amazed at how successful some of these machines were. They're basically a container with camera systems, with vending. Some you actually go and buy, some you actually order online and then go and click and collect. Some of these units were costing £15,000, but turning over £100,000 a year in retail. It is revolutionary. 15,000, you could put one on every street corner almost. Very, very quick and easy to change the way the supply chain works. Gets a high turnover, high footfall. The more of them there are, the more people will use them. I think we will see that coming, and we'll see it coming quite fast. What does that mean? What does it mean for the products that we produce, the way that we market them, the way the supply chain works? You've probably all seen this business. To me, the one revealing thing was a comment that was on their website, which at the back you probably can't see. What the comment said was, the thing that I really like about it is a surprise. I don't have to think about it. Somebody else not only sources all of the inputs, supplies them to me, they do the thinking about what I'm going to eat, but they make sure that it's going to be delicious. We're outsourcing. Consumers are outsourcing much of what they've traditionally done. Online, these new systems are allowing them to do that. And the food theatre idea. What I think this is about is it's about combining buying things with leisure, with recreation. And I think we'll see for the remaining bit of retail, this is where we'll go. Can every Tesco store, every Sainsbury's, every Asda do this? No, they can't. So how much of that will remain? Which of them will win? Which of them will change to that sort of model? We're beginning to see it, but I think there's much further to go. So are we seeing some of those changes? Well, if you look at the logistics sector, the demand for warehousing has doubled in 10 years. 60% of it is about retail. So that shows us what is happening. It's moving, and it's moving really very, very quickly. 18% of all retail is now online, but only 7% with food. Total retailers growing at 1% a year, online at 15% a year. Don't need to be much of a whiz with maths to look ahead and know where that's going. Massive change in terms of supply chain. If you look at the venture capital funding that's coming in, vast amounts of money coming in. Actually, 3 of the top 4 things now that are being invested in are about the digital agenda. When I was a young man, it was the ag sciences, the biotech bit was where all the money was going. Actually, now that's less than a quarter. The reality is money is chasing where they believe the next big thing is going to be. We've already seen today that the marketplace for the farm side is seen to increase. So is the robot market. And the robot market is moving so incredibly quickly. Simon referred to other parts of the world. Both of us were in China last year. I spoke to a Chinese group about a week ago. China is now 30% of the robot market, 30% of the supply, and that total market went up 30% last year. Those are pretty impressive growth rates. China is doing this, it's doing it at scale, it's doing it much, much faster than we are. In the industrial robot side, the UK this year will put in 2,000 robots. China will put in 120,000. 60 times as many as the UK. The reality is they're doing it, we're not doing it fast enough in my view. So what might stop us? My final sort of section then is just a few thoughts about skills. Because to me, yes, we need to invest in the tech, we need to invest in the businesses, but actually the big issue is workforce and skills. Do we actually have the skills to adopt, to specify, to maintain, to install, to run those new systems? Can we overcome the fear of change? Can we actually embrace this fast enough and move forward? So it's culture change as well as skills. Awareness, critical. Are we aware of what it might be possible to do? And this is not just for businesses, it's for the banking sector as well. Are the banks aware of how to finance those new types of machines? Will they provide the finance for something that nobody else has used before? Or where does the finance come from? If you look at skills, there's lots of reports on skills. What they all show is that if you look ahead, the demand for ICT skills, for the management skills, for the culture change and the management of teams and the emotional intelligence side is all going to increase. The basic manual skill demand is going to go down. There's any number of reports that you can point to. Exactly the same will happen within the supply chains that we all work in. Can we respond to that? The EU have looked at this and their conclusions are not that good. Actually, a lot of our workers right across the EU actually lack the skills that we need to respond to this challenge and this change. So can we actually step up to that mark? Can we move that forward? I don't think it's just about young people, it's about lifelong learning. It's about the existing workforce as well. And the critical issue to me, this is not about training new young people to come in. We've got to do that. But actually the speed of this change means that probably half of our existing workforce will lose their jobs if we don't retrain them. And I don't think we're doing anything like enough yet to respond to that. So it's about minding that gap. The skills gap is very, very real within this agenda. So my conclusions. I think that what the digital agenda is going to do is going to completely change not only the way that we physically do things, but it's going to change the supply chain that we work within. And it's going to do it faster than probably most of us expect. Demographics and labour supply absolutely means that we've got to get more out of our workforce. National living wage means exactly the same as well. Cost of the national living wage to the food chain, I estimate at about 10 billion a year by 2020. A lot of that is in food retail, it is in restaurants, pubs and hotels, but we all know what will happen if pressure's placed on them. They'll pass some of that pressure back to us on the supply side. So we've got our own concerns around labour cost, but we've got pressures coming back to us from the rest of the supply chain as well. So the automation, the robotics agenda is absolutely critical. The question is, can we upskill fast enough? On my optimistic days, I say, of course we can, because we're talking about it. We're all saying we're going to work together on it. My pessimistic side says, actually, we're not doing enough because the rest of the world's going much faster. I've already referred to China. India has just put a program in to train 10 million people in ICT. That's equivalent to a third of the UK workforce being trained in ICT because they believe they've got a skills gap. I spoke to a Chinese group, as I said, about a week ago. A business park, 300 robot businesses on one park. They're putting a college just for robotics next to the business park because actually 30% of the global market isn't enough for them. They want to do more. Are we doing enough to respond? I don't think we are. And so finally, I think if we do respond, if we do actually address the culture and the skills change and the investment, what we could actually create is a sector that competes globally, which attracts people into it, that is competitive, and that actually has higher skilled, higher paid, better jobs. Actually, those are all good outcomes, I think, for us and for everybody else that we work with. Thank you.